At dawn on June 30th, 1908, a blinding fireball tore through the skies of Siberia, so powerful it leveled 2,000 square kilometers of forest in seconds, leaving 80 million trees flattened. Yet no crater was ever found. The shockwave circled the globe, and scientists still cannot fully agree on what happened that day. If it happened again over a city, few would survive. The hunt for the truth starts with the morning the world changed forever. Morning comes late in Siberia, but on June 30th, 1908, the day arrived with a violence no one had ever seen. At a trading post near Vanavara, Semyon Semenov stood outside when the sky above the northern forest split wide open. He remembered a column of blue-white light, brighter than the sun, burning across the horizon. The air grew so hot he thought his shirt had caught fire. He tried to tear it off, but before he could move, a sound like the world breaking apart crashed down from above. The blast knocked him off his feet. Windows shattered miles away. Doors flew from their hinges. Farther south, a farmer saw his horse collapse as a wall of flame rose over the forest. In Irkutsk, hundreds of kilometers from the epicenter, buildings shook and a thunderclap rattled the city. Barographs in distant cities jumped, recording a shockwave that raced around the globe. In the moments after the flash, the taiga erupted in chaos. Birds scattered in terror. Reindeer stampeded blindly through the trees. Evenki hunters, who had lived in these forests for generations, spoke of a wind so fierce it stripped branches bare and left the land scorched. Some said the earth itself seemed to heave. Others described a silence so deep it felt unnatural, broken only by the cries of animals and the distant rumble of falling trees. The shockwave arrived in waves. First, a pressure that flattened everything in its path. Then, a series of thunderous booms that echoed across the landscape. Some witnesses heard a single explosion. Others counted as many as 5, rolling one after another like artillery. The timing depended on how far they lived from the blast. But everywhere, the sense of terror was the same. In the aftermath, the air was thick with the smell of burned resin and scorched earth. Ash drifted down, coating rivers and rooftops. For the Evenki, the event was more than a disaster. It carried a spiritual weight. Stories spread of sky spirits angered by human trespass, of a punishment sent from above. The official reports told of panic, injuries, and the deaths of thousands of reindeer, a loss that would haunt local families for years. Yet, as the hours passed, another kind of silence settled over the forest. No one could find the source of the destruction. There was no crater, no fallen star, only a wasteland where the taiga had once stood tall. The world had changed in an instant, and no one could say why. In the weeks after the explosion, rumors drifted out of Siberia like smoke. Travelers spoke of a forest turned to splinters. When the first outsiders finally reached the blast zone, they found devastation on a scale that defied belief. The trees, once packed so tightly The sun barely touched the ground, now lay flattened in every direction. For nearly 2,000 square kilometers, trunks pointed outward from a central point, as if some invisible hand had pressed down and swept them aside. The pattern was unmistakable. Millions of trees radiating out like matchsticks scattered from a single violent blow. Yet at the heart of this destruction, something was missing. Search parties expected a crater, a gouge in the earth where the object must have struck. Instead, they found only scorched ground, blackened stumps, and tangled roots. There was no pit, no fragments of rock or metal, no sign of what had unleashed such force. The land itself seemed to have been struck by a weapon that left no trace. Early field reports filtered back to the cities, capturing the strangeness of the scene. One described a circle of devastation so perfect it looked as if the forest had been peeled away. Another noted the silence. No birds, no animals, just the wind moving through charred timber. Some explorers collected samples of singed bark and ash, hoping for clues. But the cause remained elusive. As word spread, the mystery deepened. Newspapers in Russia and across Europe seized on the story, filling their pages with wild speculation. Headlines wondered if a volcano had erupted in the depths of the taiga, or if a massive underground gas explosion had ripped the forest apart. Others went further. Was this the crash of an alien craft hidden in the Siberian wilderness? Or the result of matter and antimatter colliding, annihilating each other in a flash of unimaginable energy? Some even whispered about a tiny black hole punching through the earth, leaving only chaos in its wake. The truth was, no one could explain what had happened. The matchstick forest, the absence of a crater, the silence at the center, all of it defied the rules of known science. The Tunguska event became more than a disaster. It turned into a puzzle that demanded to be solved. The world watched as the mystery grew, waiting for someone to venture deeper into the wasteland and bring back answers. Leonid Kulik first heard about the Siberian explosion in a Moscow library, years after the blast had faded from headlines. By the late 1920s, he was convinced that only a massive meteorite could have caused such devastation, and he set out to find its remains. His journey began with a train ride across Russia, followed by weeks on horseback and riverboat, and finally a slog on foot through endless swamp. The taiga was unforgiving. Kulik's letters home described food spoiling in the damp, tents battered by icy rain, and swarms of mosquitoes so thick they drove men nearly mad. Malaria struck down one assistant after another. Horses vanished into bogs. Still, Kulik pressed on. In his diary he wrote, "Our food rots in the bog. Swarms of mosquitoes drive us mad. Malaria claims another helper. I press on. This field is like no other. The trees they point, all away from a burning center. Each day brought new setbacks. Boots lost to sucking mud, supplies running low, and the constant threat of fever." Soviet officials, suspicious of his motives and slow to provide funding, offered little help. Kulik begged for more horses, more quinine, anything to keep the expedition going. Still, he refused to turn back. Photographs from the journey show Kulik and his team waist-deep in black water, hauling gear across fallen trunks. Their faces are gaunt, eyes hollow from exhaustion, and the relentless drone of insects. In one frame, Kulik stands alone in a clearing, surrounded by a wasteland of scorched timber. The forest floor is littered with splintered trunks, all radiating from a single point. The silence here is heavy, broken only by the squelch of boots in mud and the distant call of a raven. On March 18, 1927, after weeks of hardship, Kulik reached the heart of the blast zone. He wrote, "Tomorrow, we reach the place. All else must be endured." His field notes from that day describe a circle of scorched, branchless trees, all pointing outward like the spokes of a wheel, yet no crater. The taiga was rent and flattened in a wheel of ruin, yet the killer itself was nowhere. The lack of answers only deepened Kulik's obsession. He measured treefall angles, mapped the devastation, and collected samples of bark and soil. Each night, he wrote pages of notes by lantern light, hands shaking from fever. He dreamed of making Russia the center of world meteorite science, of finding a cosmic relic buried beneath the peat. But every dig ended in frustration, mud, roots, and silence. Kulik's determination became legend. He returned to Tunguska year after year, braving floods, disease, and the indifference of bureaucrats. His diaries reveal a man driven not just by curiosity, but by a sense of duty to solve the riddle that had haunted Siberia for decades. Yet even as he mapped the scars left by the explosion, the mystery endured. Without a crater or debris, the truth remained just out of reach, hidden beneath the endless, haunted forest. For decades, the world searched for a missing crater, a chunk of cosmic debris, any trace of what had torn Siberia apart. The answer, when it finally came, was stranger than anyone expected. Scientists began to look up, not down. The scars in the forest, the pattern of fallen trees, the absence of a pit, all pointed to a force unleashed above the ground, not within it. Modern simulations revealed the culprit, a stony or icy body, roughly 50 to 100 meters across, racing toward Earth at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour. As it plunged into the atmosphere, friction and pressure built to extremes. At about 8 kilometers above the taiga, the object disintegrated in a blinding airburst. In less than a second, it released energy equal to 12 to 15 megatons of TNT, roughly 1,000 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. The shockwave raced outward, flattening trees in a perfect radial pattern. The fireball scorched earth and sky, vaporizing the impactor before it could ever reach the ground. The devastation on the forest floor matched the footprint predicted by these models with eerie precision. Yet the story did not end with computer screens and equations. Forensic geologists traveled back to Tunguska, searching for physical proof. In the peat bogs at the blast's epicenter, they found a thin layer corresponding to the year 1908. Within it, microscopic spherules, tiny beads of silicate and magnetite, were locked in place. Under powerful microscopes, these fragments revealed structures and mineral signatures found only in space rocks. Their composition was alien to the local geology, confirming they arrived from beyond Earth. Lab logs and chain of custody records tracked each sample from the bog to the microscope, ruling out contamination. The spherules appeared only in the 1908 layer, nowhere else. This was the cosmic fingerprint that had eluded Kulik and generations of searchers, a trace of the vaporized visitor that had set the sky on fire. the evidence left little room for doubt. The Tunguska explosion was a cosmic airburst, not a conventional impact. The object detonated in the sky, its energy unleashed in a single catastrophic moment. No crater, no meteorite, just a shockwave and a rain of invisible fragments. The forest's destruction, the matchstick pattern, the silence at the center, all made sense at last. Scientists could now explain how a relatively small asteroid or comet, no larger than a city block, could devastate an entire region. And with that understanding came a new kind of AWE. Tunguska was not a relic of ancient history or science fiction. It was a glimpse of what the cosmos can do, and a warning that the sky is not as empty as it seems. On a winter morning in 2013, the city of Chelyabinsk, Russia, awoke to a blinding streak cutting across the sky. At 9:20 in the morning on February 15th, a 20-meter asteroid slammed into Earth's atmosphere at over 60,000 kilometers per hour. Office workers, students, and drivers all looked up as a white-hot fireball exploded high above the city. The blast, captured in hundreds of dashcam videos, turned night into day for a split second. Moments later, the shockwave raced through the streets, shattering windows and setting off car alarms. More than 1,500 people were injured, most by flying glass and debris as buildings trembled and shop fronts caved in. Emergency lines flooded with calls about the explosion. Some thought a plane had crashed. Others feared a missile strike. The true cause, a cosmic visitor, was only confirmed hours later. The Chelyabinsk airburst released energy equal to nearly 500,000 tons of TNT, 5% of Tunguska's force, yet enough to damage over 7,000 buildings. For many, it was the first time a meteor's power was not just a tale from history, but a reality recorded in real time, reminding the world that the sky's dangers are far from ancient memory. Earth's defense against cosmic hazards begins with knowing what's out there. Astronomers have cataloged more than 30,000 near-Earth asteroids, but for objects the size of the Tunguska impactor, 50 to 100 meters across, there may be 500,000 or more still hidden in the darkness. Only a tiny fraction have been found. Most are too small and faint to spot until they pass dangerously close. These are the so-called city killers, large enough to level a metropolis, common enough that another Tunguska-scale event is statistically expected every few centuries. To close this gap, scientists have launched a global search. NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, DART, was the first real-world attempt to change the course of an asteroid. In September 2022, a spacecraft slammed into Dimorphos, a moonlet orbiting a larger asteroid 11 million kilometers from Earth. The impact nudged Dimorphos into a slightly shorter orbit, proving that with enough warning, a dangerous object could be deflected. International teams are building new telescopes and sharing data, racing to find and track these hidden wanderers before they find us. The planet's safety now depends on constant vigilance, cooperation, and the hope that the next warning will come in time. Over 32,000 near-Earth asteroids are tracked, but thousands more remain undiscovered. Each one carries the potential for another Tunguska, not in remote Siberia, but over a city. Planetary defense is no longer science fiction. It is a race against cosmic odds. The sky can still explode without warning. Our vigilance, measured in telescopes, data, and will, may be the only reason history does not repeat itself.